And we are back with the correct overlays this time. Everything should be better. But at least we have the correct overlays. Lindbergh still top of the timing boards, 8/10 ahead of the second place of Wagner and abandoning this lap. If you guys joining in, if you can let me know, make sure that everything is all right. I had to reset the overlay. And up on 3 wheels, it looks like, for Horner. Coming out of turn 7 there. I think that suspension is a little tight. It did seem to be on 3 wheels. Leaning up on the front too. Could just be a little graphical error. If anyone could just let me make sure that the mic is still okay. Did have to restart the stream there, but everything is all right going forward. About 3.5 minutes left of this practice session. Lindbergh still top of the timing with that 45.7. And traffic is definitely going to be an issue here. This course is very narrow in some spots and is not very long to complete a lap. These GT4s, they are pretty good at running close to each other, but a lot of it will come down to where the traffic is on your lap. Very easy to get stuck behind somebody, especially if you come into the complex of 5, 6, and 7, or the S's of 8, 9, and 10. Very easy to just get stuck, nowhere to go. As there was a car with an off up ahead. It seems to be the number 35 of Granados. But on board with Lindbergh, who will be able to get 2 more laps in once he crosses the line, if he chooses to do so. We have a couple of the Team Lime drivers up ahead. Horner in the number 915. Quite a few abandonments of the lap. But less than 2 minutes left in this practice session as we are about to get started with qualifying. Douglas now top of the timing boards, beating Lindbergh by just 0.06 of a second. Very narrow margins there. So we do have a pretty good showing tonight. 25 drivers on the grid. And this M4 GT4 does seem to have a lot of laning issues as they come around 6 and 7. I think it may just be a graphical error with the shadows, but it sure looks like they're on 3 wheels, like they're in a front-wheel drive car coming out of the corners. Up onto the banking. I think Douglas will be able to get one more lap in, but may not want to waste the good lap time. Early on does go a little bit deep into the left-hander of 13, and a practice pit lane entry, or just diving off the track to allow the cars behind to have clean air. Douglas and Lindbergh into the pit lane. Wagner trying to cut down on the lap time a little bit. Coming out of turn 11 and on to 12. Trying to gain some time with this last lap before the end of the practice session. We will get kicked over to qualifying. It is going to be a 15-minute qualifying session. As we have the remainder of our drivers come across the line. We are about to get started with qualifying. Douglas and Lindbergh, Wagner as well, the top 3 so far, with the absence of Elizondo, all 3 fighting for crucial points to move up in this championship fight. And as we progress into qualifying, they would be my top 3 to be watching for those lap times. They are all going to be competing for pole position. Wagner unable to really put a lap up close to the times of Lindbergh and Douglas, but I know that lap is in there. Harris jumping up into P3. Harris with great finishes the previous round at Hungaroring last week in the M2, looking to repeat some good results, and as Drain comes across the line, that will kick us over to qualifying. As we are about to get started. And here we are. Oh. And qualifying has begun. Who is out first? Does seem to be Lindbergh at the front of the field, looking to bring home a good result for qualifying in that number 45 M4 GT4. Trying to get some early tire temperature in. Should be good condition, or at least good temperatures on track, but the conditions of the track is fairly new. It's going to take a while for that rubber to get put down, but in a 15-minute qualifying session, you're only going to get so much. What that will mean, though, is this track will progress in condition and drivability the longer this session goes on. Those fastest laps of the session are going to come at the very end, so while you do want to make sure that you get a couple insurance laps in to make sure that you at least get a time on the board, it is going to be a push for the fastest lap, push for that pole position at the very last moment of this session. Lindbergh with Wagner in tow just behind. At least I believe that is the 99 of Wagner. It is. Lindbergh and Wagner. Where is Douglas? Douglas in the number 32 is just a couple cars behind. Does seem to be behind the 777 of Vasquez. And as they come onto the banking for the first time, and then quickly down off of it, Lindbergh will cross the line and start this qualifying session officially and try and get that first flying lap up on the board. Out of 15, holding that M4 wide to the wall to carry as much speed out of the corner as possible. Then we will go hard braking into turn number 1. Wagner in that M4 behind, looking to gain a little bit of slipstream, which I think he did get some slipstream down the straight from Lindbergh. Wagner giving chase. There are a couple opportunities to get slipstream, namely the front pit straight and the back straight between turns 7 and 8. As they come around the long left-hander of turn 6. Then eventually the right-hander of 7. Is Wagner going to be close enough to gain a little bit of slipstream? I think he will be, as they come into the hard left-hander of 8. Wagner is looking to have been a little bit closer, gaining on that gaining from that slipstream advantage. A little bit too much of the curb from Lindbergh. Also 2 tires in the dirt for Wagner. Some mistakes from both of these drivers, but the race to set the first flying lap in this qualifying session and set the pace for the rest of the field also may just come down to being the battle for the pole position as well. Douglas, another player in that championship battle currently, is one to be watching out for in that number 32. The 777 of Wagner with an off at the exit of 13. And across the line for Lindbergh, what will it be? 45.7 for Lindbergh, close to those lap times that we saw in practice, and nothing for Wagner. Douglas does run a 46.1, and the times come in behind. Heiderstadt currently on pole position in the Holy Grail AM battle, with Young in P2 currently. Young, I believe, making their first appearance in this BM246W Challenge Series. This battle for pole position is just going to start heating up. The track has now been upgraded to fast. We are no longer dealing with green conditions, but Lindbergh trying to carry as much speed out of that corner as possible. Almost goes 2 tires into the dirt, and that is not going to be what you're looking for. But this battle for the top 3 positions, at least in the championship. Elizondo is leading the overall championship. These 3 are the next 3 in line. Lindbergh, then Douglas, and then Wagner, who is just ahead, yet to put a lap in, but is going to be competitive in terms of lap time to the drivers adjacent. The 45 of Lindbergh up ahead and the 32 of Douglas behind. Horner up into P2, just almost 2 tenths behind that time set by Lindbergh. And Boiling only half a second behind the time set by Lindbergh. With 2/3 of this qualifying session left to go, there is still plenty of time to be made. Wagner now goes 0.07 of a second slower than Douglas. Actually, Douglas up into the top of the time. Lindbergh no longer on pole position. It is now Douglas, Lindbergh, and Wagner. Douglas pulling a large margin as Vasquez throws up a time 1/10 faster than either of those drivers, throwing a wrench in the works for this championship battle. Not so happy in the previous rounds in the N2 is Vasquez, or was Vasquez, But heading into the GT4 and GT3 rounds, should be looking to close up the gaps in the championship fight. But a lot of ground to cover from an overall poor start in the BMW M2 rounds. Hoping to recover that ground in the preceding 6 rounds of M4 GT4 and M6 GT3. But there is a long way to go in that fight for those points. Atwell now the leader in the Holy Grail qualifying, with Heiderstadt in P2, Young now in P3. A few drivers into the pit lane to get some fresh shoes and a little bit of drink. Boiling and now up into pole position with a 45.2. The silver driver outclassing all of the gold and platinum drivers out there, as Vasquez falls down to P2, Douglas down to P3, and Wagner with a close in contention time. Now Douglas back up into P1 and quickly abandoning that lap, hopping back into the pit lane, throw some new tires and some fuel in the car, and get back out there to try to improve. Vasquez runs a triple zip on Douglas. 0.000 was just a fraction of a second slower. A fraction of a second slower, I should say. But Vasquez triple zip on Douglas. 45.165 for both drivers, and I don't think it's going to take much of an improvement for Vasquez to hop back up into that pole position, or Douglas to at least create a buffer to defend it. That is a very close margin. Vasquez abandoning this lap, going off at 6. Douglas rolling out of the pit lane. Boiling did not improve. I think Boiling did improve 3 hundredths of a second, or 3.5 hundredths of a second, 36 thousandths of a second between Vasquez, Douglas, and Boiling. Lindbergh, Wagner both have some work to do. Horner also not far out of that battle. Atwell looking to be in a pretty good position for the Holy Grail pole position, has 0.6 to Heiderstadt behind, but still plenty of time to improve. Triple seven of Vasquez back into the pit lane. Where is Douglas at? Just behind the 26 of Boiling. Douglas trying to gain some temperature in those tires, get them warmed up a little bit more, and Boiling allowing the traffic to go past. Douglas has a little bit of traffic up ahead, and I think Boiling is trying to just open up a gap, have some clean air to run in. And Douglas trying to make it back to the line with as much time as possible, give himself as much of a window for improvement as possible. Still, 36 thousandths of a second between P1 and P3 as they come out of 14. Douglas will be looking to improve on this lap. We'll have some slipstream help of the car ahead that is eventually going to back out and allow Douglas to go by. Now Douglas has clean air. The 66 of Atwell, the next car ahead, does have Wagner in the 99 coming out of the pit lane ahead, and that could cause a little bit of a disruption in the lap. But that is not going to be the entry into one that Douglas was looking for. Too wide and 2 tires in the dirt. Will abandon the lap and allow the rest of the field to go past. And we'll just try to clean those tires off and get another lap in shortly. Vasquez back out, actually just ahead of Douglas, looking to find that 1,000th of a second needed to improve. And Vasquez up onto the banking with the 66 of Atwell ahead and the 99 of Wagner behind. Wagner may be within slipstream range. Lindbergh finds the improvement, just 5 thousandths short of dipping into the 44s. This track is still not at optimum racing conditions. We may end up seeing those conditions for a very short amount of time at the very end of this qualifying session. Douglas and Vasquez now the same margin behind that time of Lindbergh. But Lindbergh in pole, or on pole position, and Vasquez messing up the entry into turn 1 will have one more opportunity to get a lap in. But it's going to come down to that final lap for Vasquez if he wants to find a good finishing position, or good starting position, finishing position in this qualifying session. And Douglas will have this lap and one more, but has not had too much luck in getting clean laps in recently. The last few that have been attempted have eventually had errors. Heiderstadt up into the pole in the Holy Grail with Atwell, who is on a lap now, will have one more opportunity to improve. Heiderstadt looking to grow that margin, 53 thousandths of a second between the times of Heiderstadt and Atwell. Atwell currently P2, Gonzalez now P3, Short P4, and Young P5. Trotman Grant P6 and Granados P7. The battle for the pole position is going to be on. This is as good as the track will get. Lindbergh will come across the line and start their final qualifying lap, final flying lap of this qualifying session. Coming out of the final corner onto the pit straight. The entry into turn number 1 here needs to be perfect. Lindbergh needs to buy some insurance. The number 99 of Wagner just coming onto the front straight behind, as the number 66 of Atwell may be hanging back, does seem to be hanging back. I think will allow the 99 of Wagner to get some slipstream. Actually may not. Atwell has a lap time that needs to be improved upon as well. Is it a clean turn 1 for Wagner? It does seem to be. Horner, the same. A good entry into turn number 1. Harrell clattering over the curbs, but a good entry nonetheless. Lindbergh looking to improve on this lap, buy some insurance, hold on to that pole position. Coming down the back straight. Lindbergh, I assume, would continue on with the lap regardless of if there is any negative delta or not. But Lindbergh looking to find a 10th or 2 to buy some insurance for this pole position. I assume if this lap invalidates that Lindbergh is going to abandon it. The qualifying session has come to a close, and Lindbergh will have one more opportunity to come across the line and try to find an improvement. Lindbergh 2 turns away from either securing the pole position or digging the grave that you must lie in. Coming out of the final corner, it's not going to be an improvement. Lindbergh abandons the lap. Next is going to be Wagner across the line. Wagner now 0.6 of a second behind the laps of the drivers ahead, the pole sitting lap of Lindbergh. Wagner up into P2, needed a 10th, couldn't quite get it. The number 915 of Horner across the line finds a 10th, but not enough to improve. Norman and Harrell. Harrell moves up. Who is next across the line? Is that going to be Boiling in the 26? It is. P5 for Boiling will be the best. Douglas in the pit lane. The number 23 of Young looking to improve and has the number 3 of Drain behind, but it looks to be Lindbergh on pole with Wagner in P2, Douglas in P3. Young trying to put a lap in here to improve in the Holy Grail standings. Needs 0.3 to move up a position. Does not find the time. Drain moves up into P9 And that is going to bring an end to this qualifying session. So the order for the two 30-minute races that we will have tonight: Lindbergh in P1, Wagner P2, Douglas P3, Vasquez P4, Boiling P5, Horner P6, Harrell P7, Harris P8, Drain P9, Bird P10, Heiderstadt P11, Norman P12, Atwell P13, Rowan P14, Craters P15, Gonzalez P16, Wilson P17, Jennings P18, Short P19, Young P20, Miller P21, Trotman Grant P22, Granados P23, and Merkel and Cook not setting a lap, 24 and 25. In the Holy Grail standings for their qualifying session, it is Heiderstadt, Atwell, Gonzalez, Short, Young, Trotman Grant, and Granados. We are now ready to get started. It is going to be about 2.5 minutes before we are engines fired. You'll see the lights come on those M4 GT4s, and we will get rolling. There is no chance of weather tonight for these races, but we do have a good possibility of good battles as this session will go forward. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. If you are driving or if you are at home just cheering on your favorite driver, we will be rolling here for the formation lap in about 2 minutes. One full formation lap, you'll see a lot of weaving left and right. Drivers trying to warm up those tires, trying to warm up those brakes. A little bit more maintenance on those tires and brakes than we saw previously in the M2s. These GT4s do have a little bit more technology going on than the M2s. So we will see more weaving, more generating tire warmth, more brake temperature, more reliance on those factors, and a little bit more tire wear than the M2s. I think we do have the majority of everybody running these with no traction control, as we did see a couple instances of drivers losing the rear coming out of the tight corners of 1 and 7. But it will be a mad dash to turn 1 when we get this race started. Very, very narrow entry into turn number 1 and a steep curve on the inside that you do not want to touch, as it will unsettle the car and you will be very slow out of turn number 1. It is going to be a big bottleneck zone. There is an escape road, but it is a long way through that escape road. And if you do end up needing to bail out, you can try and cut through the grass, but it is going to be very, very slow to do so. You're going to need to watch out where you re-enter the track, as Lindbergh will be firing up that engine in a pole position as we are getting ready to get rolling and started with the formation lap for the first of our 2 races tonight. 2 30-minute races, no stops, no weather. Just here to the end. 1 hour of racing as per usual, just split in half tonight, as Lindbergh is about to get us rolling. And off the line, Lindbergh leads the field. These M4 GT4s are going to have a little bit more speed, a little bit more aerodynamics, better brakes, better handling than the M2s that we raced last week at Hungaroring. Should see more of the same in terms of where drivers are finishing, but with a rotating spec series like this one, we may see a little bit of difference in finishing position. Some drivers may be used to the M4 GT4. Some drivers may have never driven a GT4 before tonight. When you run spec series like this, you have great equalizers. And Lindbergh dragging the brakes as the field lines up behind. A lot more weaving than we saw in the M2s. These are going to have more of a slick tire compared to the thicker road-like tire that the M2s would have. They would still have a slick, but I think it would be more of a semi-slick than a full-on racing slick. Lindbergh trying to generate some temperature in those front tires and setting the pace for the field. These M4 GT4s like to stand up on their front toes quite a bit when you get on the brakes. That could be what's giving them the illusion of being on 3 tires when they come into the corners. But just a few more corners to go before we are green flag racing here in round 4 of the TRC BM246W Challenge. The first round of the GT4s before we get into the M6 GT3. Lindbergh leading Wagner as they get into the 2x2 formation. Allow the rest of the field to bunch up behind. And very tall curves on the inside of those acute corners. Turn 1 and turn 13, you're going to need to watch those curves. I believe there is one at turn 8 as well, just to try and disincentivize you from using too much of those apexes. Lindbergh sets the pace for the field. Wagner lines up beside, and we are about to run into turn number 1 and hope that everybody has their ducks in a row. Brakes, brakes, brakes. Lindbergh leading the field to the line as we get ready to go green, green, green here for race 1 of the TRC BM246W round 4, first round of the M4s here at Indianapolis. Lindbergh not going very defensive as they are 4 wide into turn number 1. Wagner does make it around the outside, and it is going to be Lindbergh trying to stick it to his door. I think he will be able to in a position to hold the inside for the next corners in succession. Wagner, contact. Vasquez also involved. Vasquez now facing the wrong way. The 59 of Jennings also involved in that. Now that is just going to allow Lindbergh to pull a gap to those drivers behind. Douglas up into P2, and I think that was just some unfortunate contact between Douglas and Wagner. Wagner is going to have a lot of work to do. Don't think he fell too far behind, should be able to stay up at the front of the pack, but Lindbergh is now going to be able to break away from the rest of the field. Looked like there were some moves to be made behind Bird, with not the best starting position that we have seen. Usually in these series in previous weeks, Bird is up towards the front, but just not so much here tonight in the GT4s. Lindbergh up at the front with a gap to the second place GT4 of Douglas, who does have pressure coming from Boiling, as I think Wagner is going to be the one boiling after that turn, or after that lap 1, turn 3 contact between Douglas and Wagner. Lindbergh leads the field. Who is that all the way on the inside? It is going to be one of the Team Lime drivers. The 13, it was Jack Craters, as contact between Young and Norman. Norman is around, and that's contact between Craters and Norman, as I think Craters is having some technical issues. We'll pull to the inside and have the team check that GT4 out. But I think it may be early on the trailer for Craters, and it is going to be early on the trailer for Craters. Out in race 1 early. Maybe they'll be able to get that car repaired back out there, but we'll just have to wait and see. The gap has now closed up between Douglas and Lindbergh, with Boiling being brought into this fight. Horner just sticking along in P4, but a battle for position behind Harris with Wagner and Harrell battling, as Heiderstadt is actually Heiderstadt ahead of Wagner. Wagner trying to find a way past, and Heiderstadt currently in the lead in AM, trying to hold on to that lead, doesn't want to lose too much time. But Atwell, the next driver behind, about a full corner behind. Lindbergh still leading, but Douglas is catching, and Boiling is holding on to that slipstream. These front three have broken away from the rest of the field. It seems to be that Horner is starting to get left in a little bit of a no man's land. Then the 67 of Harris with Wagner pushing the GT4 of Heiderstadt down the front straight, and Wagner jumping behind, or Harrell jumping behind the 99 of Wagner, looking to go past the 109 of Heiderstadt. Lindbergh still in the lead with Douglas closing. Douglas now within slipstream range of Lindbergh, and Boiling starting to get dropped back from this fight. But as soon as Douglas gets close enough to put pressure on Lindbergh and they begin battling, it will bunch this group right back up and should bring Horner, potentially Harris, into this battle for the lead as well. Wagner past Heiderstadt, now trying to close up to the GT4 of Harris up ahead. And Wagner hoping that those three up front begin to battle, as I believe they will very soon. Douglas and Lindbergh. Lindbergh had a very poor run through the S's. Douglas, I think, had to check up to not make contact. But Douglas seems to be very much on the front foot, closing at that time. And Wagner will try to fight his way back up into this battle. Douglas breaking away from Boiling behind, and the gap is actually growing to the drivers behind. Horner and Harris seem to be getting dropped off a little bit, but Wagner hard charging, trying to regain those positions, regain those crucial championship points, closing up to the 67 of Harris up ahead. Heiderstadt now with pro traffic trying to make their way past, and Atwell not far behind. If Harrell and Drain find a way past, then it is going to be Atwell closing up to Heiderstadt. Atwell did run the fastest lap in the Holy Grail championship. But it is going to be, who is that? That is off. Is that Boiling? That is Boiling. And it seems to be a mistake from Boiling. I don't think that was contact with Douglas, but maybe just pushing too hard. Boiling off into the wall and down positions. Boiling very quick though, so we'll quickly jump back into the pack with Drain, Harrell, and Wagner, as Heiderstadt has actually found a way back past. And I think that incident with Boiling, there does seem to be some damage on the back, but I think that may have come from the contact with Douglas. Lindbergh still in the lead, and Douglas trying to find a way past. But Lindbergh not making it easy, and Douglas not really closing up too much time. The gap has grown quite a bit from Douglas to Horner though, and Harris, who is next in line, as Wagner has now gone back past Heiderstadt. I wonder if maybe there was some miscommunication. Drain and Boiling. Boiling, I believe, trying to push Drain, metaphorically that is. I don't think he was physically bump drafting him through, but he may very well do so down the pit straight, try and gain some time. Now this duo trying to get past the Holy Grail driver of Heiderstadt, and Atwell just there looking his chops ready to have clean air and a clean fight between themselves and Heiderstadt up ahead. Drain eyeing the move, late on the brakes, will try it. And Boiling went for the same window. Heiderstadt just closed that door, and I think maybe was not expecting both of those drivers to try and come through at the same time. Contact with Boiling, and Boiling will lose more track position and more time. Horner now falling back as Harris has actually closed that gap up. And Harris may be in position to move up onto the podium. Heiderstadt with Atwell now just behind. Drain has gone past, and Boiling was involved in that contact. Not too far behind, and definitely very quick. The leading duo still battling, still holding their delta very close to each other. It was a hard-fought battle for the pole position. Lindbergh has held on to it. Douglas, albeit was P3, but it wasn't by much of a margin. Horner now very much falling off of the pace. I think just moving up in positions due to some opportunities on track, but Harris seems to be the one with the better pace. And Horner will defend this position, but it will be up to Harris to try and find the pace to get past. And Wagner back up into P5 after that lap 1 contact with Douglas. A long way to go with no slipstream help. May be able to bring Drain along, and they can try and run each other together and use a little bit of teamwork to gain on the cars ahead. Lindbergh and Douglas continuing to fight. And now you start to open the opportunity for mistakes one way or the other. Douglas knows that he needs to find the time to make it past a third of the way through this race, so the stakes are not too high. The pressure is really not there yet. But Lindbergh just needs to make sure that he keeps Douglas behind. Cannot allow Douglas to run away, because it is very hard to regain your pace after you maybe fall off of it a little bit. Harris now going to be within slipstream range of Horner. And as they head into the S's section, I think Harris may be in a prime position to get this position back, or get this position taken away as they come down the front straight. Douglas with a slight mistake. That gap has grown now over a second, or right at a second. And Heiderstadt and Atwell. Heiderstadt will try to defend against Atwell. Atwell not quite able to close that gap up yet. The air is clean between them, but still holding that 2-second gap left to see how that delta changes. Boiling, diving to the inside. And I think that may be to, I guess, not allow Bird to grab the slipstream from behind. Not exactly sure why Boiling was all the way on the inside. This driving into the marbles could need some cooling of the tires going into those marbles to try and go onto a cooler section of the track. Harris unable to get past Horner still. But Harris is beginning to close up even closer. Will not be close enough for a move into the left-hander of 8, but just inching ever so much closer. The battle behind between Boiling and Bird. Vasquez involved in that early race incident, still trying to close up some positions, regain some time. We've got a little bit of a battle behind in the Holy Grail between Young and Short. Young is ahead of Short and trying to catch the 12 of Norman up ahead. As Norman makes a little bit of a mistake at the S's, and that is going to open that window for Young to try and find a way past. It's still at the front. The draft train continues. Douglas is within that slipstream range, or I guess was right outside of it. When you run a spec series like this, unless you get a monstrous corner exit, you're really not going to have that much of an advantage over the other driver unless you have a drastic change in setup, but everyone should be running fairly similar setups in terms of rear wing aerodynamics, brake ducts, all of those things that are going to affect your top end speed. So I think that Douglas is definitely going to have to be within slipstream range. This battle for P3, the final spot on the podium, definitely heating up. And as I said previously, Horner is not just going to give this position up halfway through this race. And I have personally raced against Horner. When it comes to defending a position, especially when you know that you may not catch the drivers up ahead, he is very vigilant in doing so. It is going to be hard for Harris to try and find a way past unless Horner just decides to let Harris pass. Harris does seem to be the faster driver. And Harris, on the previous lap, actually running a lap 0.3 of a second faster. And actually, Harris running a lap 0.6 of a second faster to the previous lap from Horner. But pushing too hard, and it's a mistake from Harris. That will just open that gap up more. Lindbergh, I think, now finding some breathing room. The pressure is off of his shoulders and really able to push forward. Lindbergh opening up the gap, but getting a lot of that curb on the inside of turn number 1. The 913 of Craters back out of the garage, but still seeming to have some issues. And Heiderstadt with Atwell still behind. Boiling once again trying to regain some positions. Just has not had the best luck tonight, but has been very good with the laps. Very good lap times. And has definitely been able to close up track position to the drivers ahead, but just getting past them has not been his strong suit today. We'll try to get past Atwell, and then we'll eventually try to get past Heiderstadt as well. Douglas with more work to do to try and catch Lindbergh up ahead. And Lindbergh with slightly less pressure, but in that previous sector, Douglas was able to find half a second. Gap was 1.4, now down to 1.0. And Douglas definitely with a good run on this lap, cleaning up those mistakes as they come to the line. What will the delta be? Stays right at 1 second. That does mean that Douglas did not lose any time in that sector 3 on the previous lap. Boiling with Bird now behind, was unable to find a way past Atwell, and I think maybe just made another mistake. And now Bird pressing the envelope for the position here. The battle in the midfield, Miller ahead of Wilson. Then Trotman, Grant, Jennings, and Short. Young has pulled away from this group behind by quite a large margin, comfortably in P3 in the Holy Grail. And then Jennings trying to find a way past the 246 of Trotman Grant. Will pull to the inside, and it will be a side-by-side drag race into turn number 1 before they get hard on the brakes to see who hits that braking zone better. And I believe it is going to be Jennings going through, and Short just behind. Gap holding steady between Lindbergh and Douglas. Douglas was running better laps, does have the fastest lap of the race, but just unable to really get that position taken away from Lindbergh, unable to fight for the lead. Able to stick around, but just not able to find the time. Harris was catching up to Horner very quickly, but now that time gain seems to have dissipated, and it has now held steady right around that 1.5 second mark. Wagner up into P5, and Drain now on the front foot, as I think Wagner may be at risk of losing a position here to Drain. Drain going to be within slipstream range as they come down the straight. Will Drain dive to the inside? Is he close enough? Just eyeing the move, keeping that front wheel on the inside and having a little bit of movement to keep Wagner's attention, but not close enough for the position there. Boiling past Atwell, Bird now behind as this battle will move through the Holy Grail fight. Boiling once again needs to try to find a way past the 109 of Heiderstadt, who they did have contact with earlier. And now using Atwell as a little bit of a pawn in the chess game of racing, trying to keep Bird at bay. Vasquez in no man's land trying to catch up. If we go back to this group of cars towards the back of the pack, Miller, Wilson, Jennings, Short, Merkel, Trotman, Grant, all within this one group, all within a couple seconds. They have quite a few cars in this area. Wilson trying to find a way past Miller. Miller holding the inside. Wilson will get the better run and may try the old switcheroo onto the back straight. Holds the inside, and they will be side by side as a drag race to turn 8. Will Wilson be able to hang it around the outside? Miller has the advantage and has the inside line. Gets a little bit of that curb though, and now Wilson will have a cleaner, a better run, but needs to find the space to make this run work. Coming out of 11 and then on to the banking. Will Wilson find the window? I think may eye the inside as they come through 12 and eventually into 13. Is it the old switcheroo? No way to really find a way past, as they will come onto the back straight, or the front straight, and resume this battle. Miller making a slight mistake, and that will give Wilson a run. I think they may go side by side. Wilson, Jennings. Jennings has the slipstream. Is Wilson going to lose a position here? Miller very, very defensive on the inside. 5 cars all together here. It's like an MX-5 Cup race. Jennings on the inside trying to find a way past Miller. Miller forced narrow to go defensive. That will give Wilson the better run of all of them. Jennings 2 tires in the dirt. But now Miller forcing the cars behind to do battle. Short finding a way up the inside as Wilson is caught out a little bit, now loses even more positions. Very tight racing in the mid-pack. The battle between Lindbergh and Douglas continues on, and they are just holding that gap between each other. But Douglas may be within slipstream range. Douglas may just be saving the car, saving the tires for the very end, forcing Lindbergh to drive the car a little bit harder. Could be strategy, as it is getting closer and closer to game time. If Douglas is going to get a move here, it needs to happen soon. Douglas can only wait for so much longer before eventually running out of time, or if Lindbergh has a little bit more car left than Douglas does. Douglas, remember, did have to push and maintain the position. Lindbergh has just been able to drive in front and hold the lead. If Douglas is unable to really find a way past Lindbergh here within the next couple minutes, it may be wraps for Lindbergh and a confirmed win. Douglas needs to make sure that he holds on to that slipstream. That is going to be the most crucial job that he has, because if Douglas falls out of that slipstream, took quite a few laps to gain it back. Now holding on to it, just needs to stay within it and time that move based on the lap times that they have been running within a couple thousandths of a second of each other. Their fastest lap's a 9.60 versus a 9.85. their previous laps within a tenth of each other. Could attribute that to Douglas just having that slipstream, which Douglas is once again going to be in that slipstream. Douglas and Lindbergh at the front continuing to fight. Douglas not going to be close enough into turn number 1 yet again. Still has the hard task in that dirty air to try and hold on to the slipstream, keep the delta from growing. Douglas did make a slight mistake, 2 tires in the dirt, but I don't think it was really enough to move Douglas off the line. Tires will start to become a question here in a couple minutes, as we are getting to around normal stint time for tires in these GT4s. They can be run a little bit longer than those in GT3s, but they still have fall off, and Douglas has found a hole, has found some sort of hole in Lindbergh's defense, and is now very much right up behind Lindbergh. Lindbergh does not go defensive into turn 8 though, forces Douglas to follow on the Optimum Racing line, and Douglas eyeing the inside into the S's and all over the rear. They actually make a little bit of contact. Douglas will now have to check up. Douglas does get a better run out of the corner though, and it may be side by side, door to door as they come into turn 13. Douglas sets up wide on the outside. Is it going to be the cutback switcheroo into 13? It is not. Douglas just lines up behind. Does get a little bit of that inside curb, as they have about 3 laps left to race. Lindbergh, now with a little bit more work to do, needs to defend. Douglas is very, very close. We will go on board with Lindbergh looking backwards, and Douglas is very much going to be within that slipstream range. Is gaining. Lindbergh now defensive. Will force Douglas to try it around the outside. It's hard to make it work, especially into this tight of a corner. And Douglas will just have nowhere to go. We'll just have to resume business as usual. Once again, those 2 tires in the dirt and bouncing off of that curb doesn't really seem to be affecting the pace too much. But that is just kind of the effect of running so close to the car ahead. You can't exactly see where you're going. You just have to trust it. Douglas finds a hole. Very, very late, braking into 6 and slides the car, but does park it on the apex, forces Lindbergh to check up, and now Douglas in the lead. Douglas has the fastest lap and is now scored leader, as he was ahead as they came into that timing line, but Lindbergh seems to have a little bit of life left in that number 45 M4 GT4. As they come through the S's. Is Lindbergh going to be able to fight this one back? Needs to hold on to the slipstream the same way that Douglas was to Lindbergh previously. And we've now got a fight behind Heiderstadt, Bird, Boiling, and Vasquez. Heiderstadt creating a little bit of a roadblock, as Bird, Boiling, and Vasquez are all 3 going to try and find a way past. Back on with the battle for the lead. Douglas trying to pull away from Lindbergh. Lindbergh is going to be within that slipstream range now. And will Lindbergh be close enough to gain? Is barely within that slipstream range, but is within it. Now trying to break that slipstream. A little bit of weaving down the straight. Hard braking into turn 1, and Lindbergh almost touching the wall up on the high line like we're in the Indy 500, just an inch off of that wall, and is well on to the rear of Douglas, not allowing Douglas to fight this position and take it away just like that. Lindbergh will fight this lead, and Lindbergh is desperately going to try and get this lead back, trying to pull the same move that Douglas pulled on him, and I think it's going to work. Forcing Douglas around the long way around the outside. Will they make door-to-door contact? They will not. Will Lindbergh be able to pull the old switcheroo out of 7? They are side-by-side, door-to-door. Douglas will have the inside. Lindbergh able to get slotted behind and into the slipstream. Is it going to be a late move from Lindbergh into turn 8? It is. Needs to make sure that he gets a good run out and is able to close that move off the same way that Douglas was prior. And this is exactly the same position Douglas was just a couple laps ago. Now with 1 lap left to go, they will come to the white flag. Lindbergh will be scored as the leader when they come into Sector 3. The timing line there. Is Douglas going to try and force the envelope? Is forced a little bit to the outside. Eventually had to commit to that outside line. Was unable to get to the inside. And now 1 lap left to go. Lindbergh ahead of Douglas. Douglas got the lead 1 lap. But Lindbergh quickly took that position back with the same move that Douglas was able to pull on him. Now trying to break the toe, desperately trying to break the toe between Lindbergh and Douglas. Weaving down the straight, Douglas is going to force Lindbergh to stay very, very narrow to the inside. Now Lindbergh moves back to the outside to defend that position, but is not going to be on the optimal racing line. Douglas will have nowhere to really go, though, as it is very hard to try and find a gap into turn 2 and eventually into turn 3. We'll just have to follow behind. Now, turn 6 has become a very good overtaking opportunity between these two. We saw Douglas make the move past. 2 tires in the dirt is not going to help there, as that move is not going to work this time. Douglas setting up very wide to try and get a better run into 7. Needs to carry as much speed as possible. The start-finish line is at the very beginning of that front straight, as the driver up ahead pulls to the side. That is the number 24 of Cook. Douglas with the gap growing to Lindbergh. Lindbergh looks to be in a good position to hold on to this lead and bring it home. Well, I will have to check onto that 4-way battle for position behind. Lindbergh, actually not Lindbergh, Heiderstop, Bird, Boiling, and Vasquez. Vasquez and Boiling side by side. But this is the battle for the lead as they come to the line. As the clock will just barely hit 0. Is Douglas going to be close enough for the move for the lead? I don't think so. Douglas does get a good run out of the corner, though, as they come to the line. How will they finish? Lindbergh just ahead of Douglas. Less than 2/10 between them. And Horner will bring home P3. Harris will finish behind Wagner. Wagner able to bring home P4, Harris P5, Drain P6. But this group of 4, Heiderstad will take the win in the Holy Grail Championship Series. Bird will bring home P8, Drain P6, Heiderstad P7, Bird P8, Heiderstad winning the Holy Grail. Boiling P9, Vasquez P10, Atwell P11, Rowan P12. Norman, coming out of the final corner, will bring home P13. Young will bring home, actually it was not Young, it was the 81 of Breakfast. Breakfast P24, Cook P22. And 5 cars in quick succession. Young, Short, Wilson, Jennings, Merkel, all coming across the line in quick succession. Car number 913 of Craters brings home P23. Miller will finish ahead of Granados, and Trotman Grant P19, 20, and Grant will bring home P21. That's race 1 complete, and it was a hard-fought battle for the lead. Lindbergh eventually able to bring it home. Heiderstad taking home the win in the Holy Grail Championship Series. As we get ready for race 2, rack 'em and stack 'em, do it all over again. Wagner, going to hope for a better opportunity, was able to do an excellent job to regain those crucial points scoring positions, finishing at P4 after being involved in turn 1, or not turn 1, but lap 1, turn 3 contact. Able to pick up the pieces and bring home a good result. Vasquez also involved in some lap 1 contact, brings home P10. Well, Lindbergh was the ultimate benefactor in that race. We will have to see if he can do the repeat. Douglas was in a very good position to bring home the lead, but was just unable to. Hoping for a cleaner start from Douglas in this second race, was the perpetrator in that contact that did move Douglas out of the contention for the lead here, out of the contention for the front pack. Did finish just one spot outside of the podium, but now we go ahead and do it at night here under the lights at Indy, as we will have those headlights on those M4 GT4s popping on here in just a second. Once again, a reminder, when the streams are done, please stick around. I will be rating another user, and we will make sure that we share the viewership and get another streamer some views, something that I have been doing with the previous streams. But we are about a minute and 15 seconds away from moving on with race number 2, the second of our 2 races tonight. Now just a minute away from engines fired. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. If you are not following on Twitch, if you wouldn't mind clicking that follow button. If you are on the YouTube side, if you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button on YouTube. And also hit that like button. It would greatly help the streams. And also, if you are not subscribed, we are trying to hit 100 subscribers on the YouTube channel. It would be the first big milestone that we hit over there, and trying to get to 400 and eventually 500 followers on the Twitch channel. So, when you are watching this stream back, if you wouldn't mind just sharing it with your friends and family, let them know where they can come watch you race in the future. And also, you can join my Discord. Keep up to date with all of the things that I am streaming, all the events that I am doing. If you're looking for an event to race in, do have resources for that there. If you are looking to get into broadcasting, I do have resources for that as well. Engines fired, and we are ready to get rolling with the formation lap here in race number 2. This time under the lights as Lindbergh rolls off the line and will lead the field to the green flag once again. This time going to have a little bit more trouble generating that tire temperature. As Wagner going to be hoping for a better race start. Did fall victim to some contact between themselves and Douglas. Wagner starting P2. Just hoping to have a better finishing result and a better lap 1 start. Wagner is a driver in a very good position to contend for the lead. Vasquez as well, but I don't know if Vasquez was really able to bring competitive pace when it came to the race time. But anything is possible. Just need to hope for a little bit cleaner start here in race number 2. And we will see if Lindbergh is able to pull the clean sweep of the weekend. 2/3 of the way there on pole position, and race 1 needs to win race 2 to have the clean sweep, and that would be very big points for Lindbergh. And I think that would move Lindbergh up into P2, potentially P1 in the championship. And if Elizondo is out another week, that is definitely going to eat into Elizondo's championship hopes. Currently leading, but out with an injury. Just have to wait and see if Elizondo is back next week. I believe would be in a position to not have any races outside of the drops that he would have missed. I believe there are 2 drops, but I could be wrong. But if Elizondo is able to miss races that would be dropped, it does make the rest of the season more crucial in terms of finishing positions in the races and also participation. But it would allow him to still be in the contention for the championship win. Well, they get ready to line up 2 by 2 once again. Lindbergh will have the inside. Wagner will be hoping for a better start, hoping for no contact. As Lindbergh, Wagner, Douglas, and Vasquez, the front 4. Vasquez also hoping for a better start, was involved in early race contact as well. Well, for the second and final time tonight, Lindbergh will lead the field to the line as we get ready to take the green flag here in race number 2 of the TRC BM246W Challenge. 2 drive-through penalties. The 246 of Trotman Grant and the 24 of Cook. 4 wide once again, and Douglas very, very narrow. Wagner now in a better position, but big contact. Vasquez somehow avoids that, but Horner being involved in that contact. I think Drain also involved in that contact. I don't know exactly how that begun, which driver it was that was a little bit late on the brakes or had a brake failure. Boiling also involved in an incident at the race start. But Lindbergh down to P2, Wagner up into P1. Douglas down to P4 as Vasquez moves up into P3. It's a complete shakeup of the start compared to what we saw previously. And now Wagner leads with Lindbergh, Vasquez, and Douglas behind. Lindbergh, as Wagner nearly makes a big mistake, and that is not going to help Wagner in trying to hold on to this lead. That will bring Lindbergh back into it. Douglas, what has happened to Douglas? Has it been a big mistake into the pit lane and possibly onto the trailer for Douglas? But after that P2 finish in the previous race, that is not going to be very good for Douglas's championship hopes. Wagner, Lindbergh, and Vasquez all vying for position. As we have had more issues behind. Who is involved? Number 103 of Bird, I believe, had to abandon the corner. And now a 3-way battle for position between Atwell, Trotman, Grant. Actually, just Atwell fighting against Bird and Heiderstadt. Wagner still trying to defend the position against Lindbergh, who is looking for the weekend sweep. And Vasquez in a perfect position to pick up the pieces should things go awry for those 2 up ahead. In the dark, your reference points are going to change. Bird, Boiling, and the 109 of Heiderstadt, all 3 together. Boiling did move down Bird up ahead and Heiderstadt up ahead, as it is Harris up into P5. Had to wait for the timing to get readjusted. Drain, Harris, and Bird, as you've got Heiderstadt, Boiling, Trotman, Grant, Atwell, a long line of cars all racing together. Atwell eyeing the move on Trotman Grant, who does have that drive-through penalty that must be served. And better hope that you have made or you have completed some pit stop practice, as getting a 30-second stop and go for speeding in pit lane is the last thing you want to do when you go to serve a drive-through penalty. The drive-through here is a big penalty, as it is a very, very, very long pit lane. Not quite as long as Spa, but about as close as you can get without being at Spa. Wagner leads Lindbergh, leads Vasquez. This top 3 has completely broken away from the rest of the pack behind. Vasquez actually running the fastest lap, but they are all 3 within slipstream of each other as they come into turn number 1. Lindbergh getting closer and closer to Wagner. Plenty of time left in this race. No real reason to get eager to make a move now. Boyling trying to find a way past Bird. Did line up on the offensive line, but nowhere to go there. As Atwell trying to make a move on Short. Short up into the lead in the Holy Grail, and I think it would be Short's first win if he is able to stay in this position. Heiderstadt in P3, the previous race winner, and in a good position to win the championship. I think in the championship lead. It is between Heiderstadt and Atwell for the Holy Grail Championship lead. Short in the lead currently. Wagner and Lindbergh, this battle is getting tight. And Wagner up at the front. Does not still. Vasquez with a 45.3, Wagner with a 45.5, and Lindbergh with a 45.5. Vasquez is in the prime position here to find that clean air should he be able to get past the two drivers up ahead. But Wagner and Lindbergh in an intense battle. Vasquez just needs to bide his time and try to find the correct opening to get past. Lindbergh in the prime position here, just in that slipstream of Wagner up ahead. Vasquez does have a little bit more breathing room, though, as he does not really have anyone behind to worry about. Eyeing the inside, feinting the move. Not close enough, and both of the drivers ahead knew that. I think we've had a big incident in the back. Merkel involved in that contact. Trotman Grant into the pit lane, stopped when he should just need to drive through, but may have a misunderstanding with that penalty. Lindbergh now under attack from Vasquez behind. Turn 6 of all corners seems to be where the overtakes are starting to formulate. You either make the overtake in turn 6 or you set it up out of turn 8, and I think that is what has happened to Lindbergh. Vasquez in a prime position to get this overtake done into turn number 8. But nowhere to go just yet. Vasquez still trying to find a hole. Very hard to get that move done through 8, 9, and 10. Your best opportunity is just to set the move up onto the front straight and try to use that slipstream to find a way past. But it is just not that easy to set that overtake opportunity up. Wagner with Lindbergh now trying to set up an overtake into 13 and 14. As they come out of 15, Lindbergh is forced a little bit wide off of the Optimum Racing line. That will allow Vasquez to close up, and that does possibly drop Lindbergh out of slipstream range of Wagner up ahead. That is not what Lindbergh wanted, now having to weave to get out of that slipstream, back into the slipstream of Wagner. This is perfect for Wagner. Lindbergh forced to go defensive on the inside, will force Vasquez around the outside, and Lindbergh able to open up a gap, breathe a sigh of relief, maybe let off that throttle a little bit. Vasquez unable to get past Lindbergh, and Lindbergh will just assume or resume the position. Heiderstadt as Horner goes through. Atwell now just behind. Short has dropped off of this fight, I think, making a slight mistake, and Heiderstadt back into the lead with Atwell just behind. Horner has gone through ahead, but Heiderstadt will try and fight this position back as they come into turn 6. Heiderstadt positions that BMW on the inside. Who has gone off into the grass? It is Norman with Short. They both go off into the grass at the exit of 6. Battle at the lead continues on. Wagner has not been able to shake Lindbergh. Lindbergh has not been able to shake Vasquez, but that gap to Vasquez behind has grown by quite a bit. If Vasquez falls off of the slipstream of the leading duo, that would not be good news for Vasquez, as he would have to rely on the battle of the two ahead to gain. But if they do not battle as hard as Vasquez would need. That would allow, or that would not allow Vasquez to really close up, but that has all completely gone out the window. Lindbergh seems to be at a disadvantage here, as Vasquez has once again pulled up to the back of Lindbergh. Now we'll have the advantage on the inside. Feints to move. Lindbergh does not fall forward, assumes the racing line, but a little bit deep into turn one. Still nowhere for Vasquez to go, but they are beginning to allow that grasp on Wagner to slip. And that's exactly what Wagner needs. That's exactly not what Lindbergh needs. Lindbergh and Vasquez both need to kind of work together here to not allow Wagner to completely run away. Lindbergh with a great run through turn 6, pulling Vasquez through, who did set up on the little bit wider line. And now I think Lindbergh will be back within that slipstream range of Wagner. Three-way battle for position between Boiling, Harris, and Bird. Drain up ahead, trying to run away from this battle, but they are weaving, bobbing, and weaving for position. Bird may try to go up the inside of both of them, does not. Boiling up into P5, but a little bit of a mistake does force Harris to check up, as there is nowhere to really find a safe way past through the S's. But Harris now back in a position to try and get that position back. Wagner and Lindbergh still doing battle up ahead. Lindbergh got a much better exit out of 14 and on to 15 that time. Has been the crux of Lindbergh's previous 2 laps. That has been the mistake that allowed Vasquez to join in that fight for P2. Now Lindbergh got a much better exit of turn 15, or of turn 14 and into turn 15. That did allow Lindbergh to have a much better run down the front straight. Now Wagner back into the clutches of Lindbergh, and Vasquez not out of the woods. Needs the 2 behind to battle a little bit more, needs to find some pace or a mistake from the 2 behind, but that slight mistake from Wagner there is not going to be what he wants, and Wagner does need to watch out for the overtake that we saw in race 1, where Douglas initially overtook Lindbergh and where Lindbergh was eventually able to set up the retake of position on Wagner, or on Lindbergh, or on Douglas, sorry, Lindbergh on Douglas. Wagner does hold the fastest lap into the S's. The exit of 8 there, where you are trying to get that weight transfer, does seem to start to be a little bit of an issue for these drivers in this M4 GT4. But this battle for the lead, 3 ways still going on. Wagner still up in the lead after taking that lead early, but both Lindbergh and Vasquez not allowing Wagner to run away with it, forcing him to work for it. And Lindbergh and Vasquez both doing a good job of not really impeding each other too much. If I were those 2 drivers, granted they may not have contact or with each other in terms of communication, I would try to convey the point of, hey, we can't let him run away. We both want to win this race. We need to kind of work together to keep him from pulling away, so we both still have a chance at winning this race. When it comes down to 5 minutes, you don't want to be battling like this with still over 50% of this race left to go. Wagner and Vasquez, with Lindbergh in between. Back onto this battle for P4. Harris has now closed up onto Drain, as there is quite the gap between this mid-pack battle and the battle for the lead. That battle for the lead is actually getting very, very close. Lindbergh forced to go defensive into turn 8. And how has that fared? Vasquez has found a way past into the S's, now looking to move forward. Vasquez, fastest lap so far, actually less than a tenth behind that of Wagner, right around 3/4 of a tenth a 45.317 from Wagner versus a 45.396 from Vasquez. Vasquez has been running very good lap times, and Lindbergh now is going to be the one at risk of getting dropped off of the pack here. Has not really been able to run competitive lap times of 45.5, which if he is able to stay within the slipstream of these two up ahead, as he has now fallen back down to P3, if he's able to stay within that slipstream, should be able to just cruise along behind the two ahead. Is within slipstream range. And Vasquez now trying to find the opening and fight for the lead. Boiling up into P4 is what has happened between Drain and Harris. They have both fallen back down quite a ways, as Drain and Harris now down to P8 instead of battling for P4 like they were. It is now Boiling and Bird fighting for P4. Horner with a gap between them. Heiderstadt looking to find a way, or actually Drain looking to find a way past Heiderstadt. Heiderstadt will hold on to his position. Atwell now falling behind short, as I think there was some contact or just a mistake. Doesn't seem to be too much damage on Atwell's BMW. I don't really see any as the light comes around. So it must have just been a mistake, but short in a good point scoring position. P2 in the Holy Grail currently. Wagner up ahead. Lindbergh now pushing the envelope on Vasquez, and this is not what they need to do at this time. They both need to work together. Lindbergh will go on the inside of Vasquez into 13, and the longer they battle, the more they battle. Lindbergh early on the brakes there, actually forcing Vasquez to, I think, brake a little bit earlier than he wanted to. But the more they battle, I think whenever they come across the line this next time, Wagner is going to be outside of slipstream range, and they are just going to let Wagner run away with it. I'd expect drivers of this caliber to kind of work together a little bit more, especially with this much of the race left, but it is more about positions here than it is positions there. So they will continue to fight for P2 and P3. And this door-to-door through turns 2 and 3 is just going to allow Wagner to pull away. But they have every right to race, just as they have every right to defend. Lindbergh looking to pull the old switcheroo from 4 and 5 into 6. And we'll try it around the outside, and all this time Wagner is able to kind of slunk it down in the seat a little bit, breathe a sigh of relief, watch that mirror, and able to maybe go 90% rather than 100%. Does not need to necessarily defend like his life depends on it. Vasquez will need to try and break away from Lindbergh, but if Vasquez is really unable to find some time here, or if Wagner backs off a little bit too much, there's not really going to be much of an opportunity for Vasquez to try and find a way to close that gap, especially not with Lindbergh putting so much pressure on and trying to get those points scoring positions away. I don't think Lindbergh is really going to have too much of a chance at this moment to try and get this lead back. And Lindbergh just one step away from the sweep. It is not over yet. Bird now up into P4 as Boiling and Horner will do battle as they come into 13. And just behind, another pocket of cars, 4 ways, Drain, Harris, Wilson, and Short. As Atwell has been dropped off of that pack slightly short. Currently P2 does have Atwell, who has just entered the background, to contend with for this position. Drain defensive with Harris and Wilson behind. Is Wilson going to give Harris a little bit of a bump, or are they going to go 3 wide into turn 1? Wilson eyeing the inside, but that gap has closed quite a bit, and that would have been a very risky 3 wide. Does allow the 2 ahead to go 2 by 2. And that is actually going to be very, very good for Wilson to try and get a run. They are neither driver going to be able to really carry all the speed that they could through. Harris makes contact with Wilson. Wilson gets on the brakes, and it ends up causing a collateral effect as that contact with Wilson. Wilson trying to give that position back, ended up turning Harris into short. Short ended up turning Harris back around. Now Lindbergh looking to be in trouble. Vasquez seems to have found some pace and is able to open up the gap behind, and Wagner has made a big mistake. This battle is not over. Wagner carrying a little bit too much speed into 13, and I think just had to check up, not lose that car. And now Vasquez onto the rear of Wagner, definitely going to be within slipstream range, and I think that is going to pull Lindbergh within slipstream range as well. No, Lindbergh just going to be outside of it. But now if they begin to battle up ahead, Lindbergh will be brought right back into this battle. It is not over yet. In case you were maybe starting to lay down and take a nap like it's halfway through a NASCAR race, no, there is still plenty of action going on. This battle for the lead continues on further. Much, much further back. There is quite a large gap between the leaders and the battle for P4. Horner with Bird just behind with Heiderstadt, the current Holy Grail leader. And then Boiling trying to gain some positions as well. Drain and Short together. And Harris lost quite a few positions with that spin. Back onto the battle for the lead. Wagner still leading, Vasquez P2, but pushing pressure on to Wagner. I think we may go on board with Vasquez. One thing that you're going to look for here is counter steer. I don't really see too much of it. Wagner up ahead. Need to see how smooth he is. You can see Vasquez in the mirror behind. This is where Wagner had that mistake previously. Just runs nicely, but Vasquez is close. You see that blue and yellow, seems like Bielstein colors on that M4 GT4 behind. And Vasquez giving Wagner a big old whiff from that porky nose on these BMWs. Vasquez is close behind. Is Vasquez going to try and force the envelope, force the overtake into turn one? Does not. Goes to the outside, forces Wagner to hold the inside. Will Vasquez be able to find a way side by side through two? Wagner has gone a little bit deep. That does give Vasquez the outside line, but not much to do with that outside line. Lindbergh has now been dropped off of this fight, but with Wagner and Vasquez now close together, as long as Lindbergh is able to run a somewhat competitive pace, should be able to get sucked back into this battle. But the battle rages on. Currently two ways. Lindbergh still not out of the question, but Wagner and Vasquez together at the front. Horner in a comfortable P4 for now, but Bird, Heiderstadt, Boiling, Short all together. Drain also in that pack. And now I think Wagner beginning to falter. Vasquez is seeming to find some holes in the armor, as Vasquez has closed up that gap closer and closer. Lindbergh getting dropped off slightly. The number 35 of Granados in the grass at the exit of 13, trundling through the grass thing, trying to find the track at turn 15. Vasquez with a much better run out of 14 than Wagner as they come on to the front straight. We've got about 4 laps left of this race. Wagner still ahead of Vasquez. Vasquez eyeing the move into turn 1. Lindbergh does not take the bait, does not defend it. Not quite on the optimum racing line. Lindbergh still there with the opportunity, not really in a competitive position now as we see him just pop into the background for a split second. This battle now fully between Vasquez and Wagner. Wagner has been in the lead, has led every lap, I believe. and Vasquez is looking to change that. We have seen back and forth battles. Vasquez and Wagner both have not improved on their lap times in the previous few laps since they set their respective fastest lap. Lindbergh, I think, made a big mistake and has now dropped off this fight quite a bit, but is in a prime position to pick up the scraps if there are any argy-bargy between these two. Heiderstadt still leading the AM Holy Grail championship fight here. Heiderstadt in the lead in Holy Grail. Short back up into P2 and Atwell in P3. Going to be good points for Heiderstadt should he be able to bring home the win in the Holy Grail championship. Wagner and Vasquez fighting more and more. Vasquez as close as he has ever been. This time Wagner is forced to go a little bit defensive. Vasquez goes even more offensive. Is Wagner going to hang it around the outside? They make contact door to door. Vasquez does ultimately give that position back, but it is going to be elbows out between these two here to the end. We should have 2 more laps left of this race after this lap, and it is going to come down to the last one. I can guarantee you that, unless someone makes a massive mistake. But the way that these drivers have been driving for the past 25.5 minutes, they are not going to be making any mistakes anytime soon. And if they do, they are not going to let the driver ahead or behind really take advantage of them. Vasquez once again in a good opportunity to get some slipstream from Wagner. Into the S's, Vasquez does get a little bit of the curb, but I think he has found a little bit of time that can be found in using it. As they come through the S's, they will have this next lap and one more, a little bit less than 2 minutes per lap, but I think they're going to come across with 3 minutes 30. That will give us 2 more laps of this race as we come to turn 13. Wagner has made a mistake here. Vasquez was not able to really pounce on it before, but it did set up this battle quite a few laps later. Lindbergh has found a couple tenths as Vasquez carried a lot of speed out of 15, almost making contact with the wall, and this battle does this song and dance again. Vasquez trying to find the inside of Wagner at turn number 1. Eventually does the crossover and tried to pinch the inside of Wagner around the outside, but that is going to be a very, very tricky move to make it stick as they come into 4. We have seen overtakes here at turn 6. Vasquez is in a very good opportunity. Wagner will hold the inside. Setting up a little bit too wide can open up the overtaking opportunity through 6, or can put you on the opportunity for a better momentum exit of 7, which will set up an overtake into 8. They both seem to be pretty even footing for now, Vasquez and Wagner, as they will have 1 more lap after this one to fight for this lead. Lindbergh still in the background, closing up a couple tenths here and there as this battle continues to progress. Vasquez needs to try to find some time. Needs to stay onto the slipstream. That is the one mistake that Vasquez can make. If Vasquez allows Lindbergh to get outside of slipstream range, then it is almost going to be wraps for Vasquez. Wagner a little deep into 13, late brakes. A late tap of the brakes to try and make sure that he made the corner, but they will come to the white flag here as Vasquez will once again be within slipstream range of Wagner. Wagner will try and take the lead at turn 1. Will have to defend against Vasquez. Cannot allow Vasquez to get past early, because if Wagner gets caught on the back foot, Vasquez does not press the envelope into turn number 1. We'll have to try and find the opening later on. Look at the opportunity at turn 6, the long left-hander. We have seen the move be made there. Vasquez is closing up. Wagner very wide. The door has opened for Vasquez, but unable to fit through it. As they come into 6, how is Vasquez going to fare? Not close enough. As they come through 6, Vasquez will need to try and set up a run into 8. Should be easy to defend for Vasquez if Vasquez can get ahead by the time they get to turn 8. But Vasquez has to get there first. Is not really going to be close enough, and now it is going to have to come down to heroics from Vasquez if he wants to try and take this lead away. Late on the brakes here, or it's got to be a monstrous run out of there. Into the S's, a good run for Vasquez. A touch of the brakes, but not dragging the brakes quite like Wagner is. Carrying more speed through, but needs to make sure that that rotation does not throw that car off. Is Vasquez going to have an opportunity into the hard right-hander of 13? There is a sharp curve on the inside that you can't really use too much of. Is Vasquez going to go for it? Is not. Needs to get a better run than Wagner out, and does. Vasquez does get that better run. Wagner had a little bit of a mistake as they come one behind the other out of 15. Is Wagner going to hold on to it? I think he does. I don't think Vasquez is going to be close enough to take it. Vasquez absolutely putting everything that he's got into it, but unable to do so. Wagner takes the win in race number 2. Vasquez, P2, denies Lindbergh the sweep, but at least Lindbergh will be on the podium for both races tonight. Wagner got the better result that he wanted. Good championship points. Same for Vasquez, redeeming himself, not with the win that he wanted, but did bring home P2. Lindbergh in P3. Horner will finish ahead of Bird, P4 and P5. Heiderstadt will finish ahead of Boiling. Heiderstadt bringing home the win yet again in the Holy Grail Championship. Heiderstadt also bringing home good points in the overall championship. Heiderstadt P6, Boiling P7. Short, I believe, will bring home a first-time podium in the Holy Grail Series. As Short, P2 in the Holy Grail, P8 overall. Drain, P9. Atwell, P3 in Holy Grail, P10 overall. Harris, P11. Rowan, P12. It is going to be Wilson, P13. Norman and Young side by side at the line. Norman ahead of Young. Norman, P14. Young, P4 in Holy Grail, P15 overall. Merkel with Miller beside. Breakfast brings home P16. Jennings, P17. Merkel, P18. And that is going to bring an end to the festivities tonight. Wagner got the finish that he wanted, bringing home the win in race number 2. Vasquez P2, Lindbergh P3, your podium. And in the Holy Grail, Heiderstadt P1, Short P2, and Atwell P3. Thank you all for tuning in tonight. Please stick around in the stream. We are going to go ahead and raid somebody, so if you will just hang tight, we will find somebody to raid. If you are not following, I would greatly appreciate it if you would mind, or if you wouldn't mind throwing me a follow on Twitch. Same thing on YouTube. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing, you can use a Twitch Prime subscription. It is free if you have an Amazon Prime subscription. Let's find somebody to go ahead and raid. I think we're going to go ahead and raid Mr. Matty with the GT3 Team Series. Has been racing for quite a while and seems to be in a good spot. All right, everybody. Go ahead and join that raid if you wouldn't mind. He's actually racing at Laguna Seca, and they are side by side into the corkscrew. All right, thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all next week. See you Monday for GFR. See you next week for round 5 of the TRC BM246W series. Thank you for tuning in, and have a good night.